Hey guys, all right, it's day 3 of our read aloud of How High the Moon, written by Karen Parsons. All right, we are back. Whoops, where are we at? With Ella. She is back, and this time I am prepared. I have a Post-its, and I have a pen, and I am ready to go. All right, here we go. How High the Moon. Ella. Henry and I didn't say nothing to Myrna about what he done. Yeah, let's remember what happened. Okay, so we know that Henry, Myrna, and Ella all live together with their grandma and grandpa somewhere in the South, in South Carolina. Uh, Alcaloo, South Carolina. We also know that this takes place in the 1940s in the South because we know that the war is happening. And then there's also the food scarcity, right? Because the guy gave them sugar because of the rations, the food rations, because of the war. We also know that Ella's mom lives in Boston, and she wrote her a telegram that said that she wanted her to come up there to be with her. And Ella thinks that means she wants her to come live with her. We also know that Henry's dad, and Ella doesn't know who her dad is, but she's very light skinned because kids were calling her Zebra. Do you guys remember that? We also know, which would be like black and white, right? We know that Henry, and so she doesn't know who her dad is. We know that Henry's dad is in the war. We haven't heard anything about his mom. We don't know anything about Myrna's mom and dad. We just know that they all live together and they're cousins. All right. Henry and I didn't say nothing to Myrna about what he done. Oh yeah, because Henry by accident stole that fish lure. And that was kind of scary because the cop came in and then, it was a whole thing. Okay. Henry and I didn't say nothing to Myrna about what he done. We just went about fishing and even caught a few before the day was done. Only one was big enough to bring home, though. I'd been so nervous about Henry taking that lure and then so busy trying to keep Myrna from asking what took us so long that I almost forgot about the mean things she'd said to me. It wasn't the first time she'd given me a hard time because of how white folks treat me, and her words burned. It was true that some white folks treated me real nice, stroking my cheeks, patting my head, telling me I was pretty, the way Mrs. Parker had. But there were some that sucked their teeth as I passed by. Some even looked at me like they smelled something bad or turned their heads or gave me a sharp elbow to the ribs. White folks and colored. Light-skinned, high yellow, zebra. Aside from how my hair curled up and my skin being lighter, I didn't look so different from other colored folks. Granny says Myrna's jealous. She says Myrna wishes she had lighter skin and her hair was more curl than kink. That's plumb crazy. Myrna is beautiful. She's tall and slim. She's got a real elegance to the way she walks, like she's a queen or a princess. She has long black lashes, and her eyes turn up at the corners a little, like a cat's. Henry likes to make fun of that, but I think they make her look mysterious. Her skin is as smooth and pretty as a chestnut. She's even got that red just under the surface that makes her cheeks glow. All that talk of Myrna being jealous of me is nonsense. Granny just doesn't want to admit that Myrna is mean. We call Myrna our cousin, but she ain't related by blood. Uh-huh. Granny and Poppy decided to keep Myrna and raise her as their own after her real mama died. She's always been our family, but still, every year when the holidays come around, she gets kind of sad seeing everybody with their folks. I'm always sure she's thinking about her mama, wondering about her daddy. I often wonder about mine, too. I was only a baby when Mama and Henry's parents, Mama's sister Rhoda and Rhoda's husband Teddy, all moved from our little town of Alcaloo, South Carolina, to the big city of Charleston. They all went there looking for work, since there were plenty of job opportunities in Charleston. Mama and Rhoda quickly found work cleaning houses, and it wasn't long before Teddy found work at a filling station. Me and Myrna stayed behind with Granny, Poppy, and Myrna. Now, a filling station isn't a term that we use very often anymore, right? So you might wonder, what is a filling station? This would be a good time to write down filling station. And then I'm going to put question marks because that is my question. What is that? Okay, and then I could stop right now. I would stop and look it up before you kept going. Okay, just so you know, a filling station is like a gas station. Where were we? Filling station. Okay. Me and Henry stayed behind with Granny, Poppy, and Myrna. For a while, they'd come and see us on weekends and holidays. Granny would cook up a big meal and with peas and greens, chicken and gravy, and bread pudding. There'd always be bread pudding. But after a while, they only came once a month. Said it took a lot out of them, time, effort, money, to make the trip every weekend. Henry and I were too little to notice much. Even so, Granny insisted on continuing to make weekends special, cooking up nice meals and playing music on the phonograph. Phonograph's like a record player. Yeah, record player is like a music box. After only 2 years in Charleston, Mama decided to move up to Boston, a real big city. She said there would be better job opportunities there, but everybody knew she wasn't moving to Boston to find better cleaning jobs. She was heading up there because she had an itch. Granny said she'd always had it. Mama wanted to be a singer, and not just in the choir of our local Clarendon Baptist Church. She'd done plenty of that her whole life, and she was ready to move on. She wanted to make records you could play on your phonograph or hear on the radio. She wanted to get on the stage, decked in fancy gowns and glittery jewelry, pouring tears into a microphone. She wanted to make people smile and cry and applaud. Charleston, big as it was too small for Mama's dreams. When she went, everyone in Alcaloo quietly shook their heads and whispered. They readied themselves for Mama's big disappointment. But my Mama went and proved them all wrong. Some years later, my Uncle Teddy got called to serve in the war. Though he had never talked about it, I think Henry was scared all the time. Afraid he was going to come home to the news that his Mama had received a telegram, like the one our neighbors, Mrs. Fields, got, or the one Robert Smith's family got. Whenever I heard Henry saying his prayers at night, I'd hear him spend an extra long time praying for his daddy, fighting far, far away. So they just talked right now about a telegram. So back before email and mail, they used to send notes to each other through sounds. Like it'd be a little machine that would do it, and then you would get it at the post office, and it was called a telegram. And that was the way that they could call. It was kind of like a telephone call over a machine that would type it out. And that's how people would get information from faraway places. So if you were over in Europe fighting a war, they could send a message that way because email and stuff like that didn't exist. A lot of times, that's how people found out when their loved ones were killed in the war. They would get a message, a telegram, that would tell them that they had died, which is pretty sad. It's kind of a sad way to find out. Okay, so she could hear him spending an extra long time praying for his daddy, fighting far, far away. Henry got letters from him all the time about Italy, where he was stationed, or about friends he had made, or funny stories he'd heard. There was always a drawing, too. Something that happened that day, or something he saw, or a portrait of a friend. Once he drew a picture of himself sleeping on the beach, smiling, while 2 crabs danced on his shoulder. I'd never known my daddy. Granny said he'd moved out west a long time ago, before I was even born. Mama never talked about him at all. I tried not to think about it that much. Poppy had been all the daddy I could ever want. When I was little, he used to lift me up to smell the blossoms in trees. I'd stick my face in the center of a saucer magnolia and try to sniff in its fragrance. He taught me how to build a birdhouse and a doghouse. He taught me how to ride a bike. All I ever learned about the stars, like which one is North Star, which one makes up the Orion's Belt and the Big Dipper, how to locate the Milky Way, I learned from Poppy. And sometimes I'd just sit on the porch with him, not doing nothing, not saying nothing. We'd just be together. It's not like I needed my real daddy, but I wanted to know who he was. And now that I was going to be living with Mama, I could find out. All right, guys, that was a short chapter. Our next chapter is called Myrna, so we'll go on to that tomorrow. Okay, stopping and jotting. Maybe you have something that you could connect with in your real life from that. Maybe you have somebody in the military that fights and goes off and has been in some war. Maybe you've never met your daddy or your mama. Or maybe you don't live with them and you live with your grandparents. Those are all great connections that you could be making. I do want to take 1 second before we keep moving further because there's a couple of things that come up. So we talked about filling stations, which is a word that used to be used for like a gas station where you fill it up. So that would be one word. So this takes place in the 1940s, right? That was a long time ago. And so, over 70 years ago. And people use different words back then than they use today. So there's certain things like we call people of color people of color. We wouldn't call them colored. That's not a term that we would use anymore. But back in the 40s, that is how you call Black folks or people that were brown skinned. So like Latinos and typically though it was like Black people would be referred to as colored people. But it's not a term we use anymore. We can say it because it's in our book. And that is a terminology of the time. So that was one of them. Yeah, and you'll just notice like the dialect that they speak, right? The way that they talk. It's not like book English. It's broken English is what it's called. But broken English is a silly word for it too. So ain't nothing. Things like that. It's very Southern. Yeah, so just little things like that we can take note of, right? It's not necessarily stuff that we would use today, but it gives us context. It gives us a little bit of historical accuracy for that. All right, but we all know that this is it's a made up story, right? It's fiction. The author in one of our talks yesterday was talking about how she did get inspiration though from real life. That was where her mom was born and raised in the 40s, and this was all stories that she had heard, but they weren't her real stories. They're just stories that she had heard. Anyways, I like this book. I hope you're liking it too. I can't wait to read the next one and find out a little bit more about Myrna. Interesting. I'm going to actually make a little note about that. I was just thinking about that, right? So we learned that Myrna's mom died in childbirth. But I want to know more. So I wonder about her dad. All right. So I made a little post-it, right? This is my stop and jot. I'm going to go ahead and add that to my journal so that I can find out more later. All right, you guys, have a great rest of your day. Turn off the computer. Go outside and play. It is gorgeous outside. I'm going to get ready to go for my run. I'll see you all later. Bye.